Okay, guys, we're back. So we're going to continue our look at Socrates. And consider a look at Socrates. I don't know. I tried to teach something new, and then the semester, I've never taught this before, and then the semester got canceled. And I don't know. It's hard to know. One of the things I wanted to do this semester was get a sense of how you're feeling about this material. And it's hard to do that when I'm now teaching online, because I can't see any of your faces. So it's just me in my backyard talking about this, insane thing. But, here I go. I do think it's working pretty well in my mind, though. I feel like there's a lot of opportunities in this thing. One of the things I'm trying to do, well, one of the things your teachers want to do is they want to give you material they think is relevant to your life. Um, but oftentimes, I think the mistake that teachers make is they try to pick things that are like ripped from the headlines, recent issues for young people in America, in New York City. And so they pick these topics that are like, they're good, but they're very recent. I mean, one of the things I'm out to prove is that actually old stuff is relevant to your life too. And I think there's a lot in here that has a lot to do with your lives, specifically because you're college students, and so you have to write papers for all of your classes. And this is an entire famous piece of philosophy about writing speeches and papers and talking in class. And so I think it's pretty valuable to go through. I don't know if it's working. I don't know if I've lost my mind. It's very weird being out here by myself all the time, but let's see how it goes. At least it's sunny. Also, some cats. There's a big cat. Let's go look at the cat, guys. Let's go look at the cat. I got this special thing. Let's see. Can you see it? Let's go see. Is he over there? Look at the kitty cat. Yeah. Okay. All right. I like that. Um, so let's take a look at Socrates and Phaedrus discussing. So the first thing is they complain about the organization. Phaedrus says, "You're making fun of that oration of ours." And he is making fun. He's saying, "Oh, it's just like this badly designed, epitaph on a tomb." He gives this little poem here, and the point of this poem, you don't need to understand it really well. You just need to recognize that you could rearrange the lines and it would say the same thing. I am a maiden of bronze and lie on the tomb of Midas. So long as water flows and trees go tall, so long here on this spot, by his sad tomb abiding, I shall declare to passers-by that Midas sleeps below. It would mean the exact same thing if I said, so long here on this spot, his sad tomb abiding, so long as water flows and trees grow tall, I am a maiden of bronze and lie on the tomb of Midas. I shall declare to passers-by that Midas sleeps below. It doesn't matter what order you say it in. The organization, nobody thought about organization. They didn't care. They just slapped the words on there. So Socrates says, well, I will say no more about your friend's speech, lest I should give offense to you. Although I think that it might furnish many other examples of what a man ought rather to avoid. So he says Lysias' speech is such a bad thing. You could really study it to figure out everything not to do. It's pretty insulting. Socrates is not Socrates doesn't like Lysias because Socrates is interested in the truth and how to use words to get to the truth. And Lysias is only interested in convincing other people to agree with him, regardless of whether it's true or not. This is the conflict in the Phaedrus, is between those two poles. Is the used car salesman whose job it is to sell you anything his boss says to sell you, or the philosopher whose job it is to discover things that are true and share knowledge? And guy, here's the cat again. There's the kitty cat. Oh, there he goes. Okay. It's a whole show today. This is exciting. Um, I'm joking now. I'm going to get like this cat's going to attack me right in the face. All right. So Socrates says it's something you could learn a lot of stuff to. He's stuff to avoid. He says, but I will proceed to the other speech, which, as I think, is also suggestive to students of rhetoric. And Socrates is talking about his own speech. In what way? He says the two speeches you may remember were unlike. Where I in one argue that the lover and the other that the non-lover ought to be accepted, right? So he says the two speeches Socrates gave. So Socrates, he says he's tired of insulting Lysias, so now he wants to talk about the two speeches that he gave. And of course, one of them, he said, he argued opposite things in the two speeches. He considered it from both sides, is one thing that the way your teachers would tell you to do this. But he gave a whole speech about why love is bad, and then another speech about why love is good. And Phaedrus says, and right manfully, I mean, like he did a good job on those speeches. He says you should rather say madly. And madness was the argument of them. For as I said, love is madness. Yes. And of madness there were two kinds. One produced by human infirmity, and the other was the divine release of the soul from the yoke of custom and convention. So he says, listen, those speeches were crazy, but Socrates always likes to define his terms. There are two different kinds of crazy. One kind of crazy is like, when you become mentally ill and can't function anymore, and you start, drooling and you lose your mind, and you can't tell right from wrong, and you can't tell good from bad. But the other kind is a kind of madness that's inspired from the gods. He says that that second speech Socrates gave was inspired by the gods, and so he's defining his terms before he gets into this discussion of them. He says, the divine madness was subdivided into four kinds. Socrates loves a good subdivision, right? He likes to define the thing. So people say, you're crazy. And he says, what kind of crazy? Crazy like mentally ill, drooling in an asylum, totally useless? Or crazy brilliant? And then you go, crazy brilliant. And he goes, there are four different kinds of crazy brilliant. Let's list them. And then he does. He loves subdivisions and definitions. And you can see why. It's the same thing we did with a sandwich in our class. So he says, the divine madness was divided into four kinds: prophetic, initiatory, poetic, and erotic. So prophetic is when you can see the future. Initiatory has to do with like religious incantations. Poetic is, inspires poetry, and erotic inspires love. Having four gods presiding over them. The first was the inspiration of Apollo, the second that of Dionysus, the third that of the Muses, and the fourth that of Aphrodite and Eros. So these are just the ancient Greek gods that sort of go along with those things. Because Apollo is the god of prophecy. He can sort of see the future, and Dionysus is the god that does initiatory stuff that's like religious ritual, and the Muses are the ones that inspire the poetry, and Venus and Aphrodite and Eros inspire the erotic. He says, in the description of the last kind of madness, which was also said to be the best, that's love, we spoke again as love in a figure. And by figure here, he means metaphor. Figurative language is metaphorical language. They talked about love, in which we introduced a tolerably credible and possibly true, though partly erring myth, which was also a hymn in honor of love, who is your Lord and also mine, Phaedrus, and the guardian of fair children. To him we sung the hymn in measured and solemn strain. I want you to notice in particular this interesting thing that Socrates does here, where he says, they talked about a figure. Now, the figure is a metaphor, and the metaphor that Socrates was talking about was the idea that love is like the soul can grow wings, and it flies high, and that the soul flies up to heaven and sees these beautiful things, and then it crash lands in a person and is stuck on earth, and then when it sees love, the wings begin to grow back, so because it wants to fly high again, and when it's away from the person it's in love with, the wings don't grow anymore, and it's in pain, and that's why people are sad when they're away from people they love, and they get excited when they see people they love. It's interesting. He says it's tolerably credible, meaning like maybe it's true, right? It's possibly true, though partly erring myth. So he admits right there that like maybe that whole story he told about chariots and horses, about the soul with wings, about the soul flying up to heaven and being reincarnated in a person, and the soul trying to get back to the person. He says maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But he pretty much admits there. He says there's error in it. So it's really crucial to understand that Socrates is not claiming this is 100% true. It is extremely important to me that you understand I did not give this to you because I think I believe in reincarnation and all of this stuff, and sort of magic souls that fly up to heaven and see these things in the heaven to follow the gods. I'm not trying to get you to be followers of Zeus or whatever. What we are doing is we're using these stories to think about philosophy, and that's what Socrates does, and that's what we are doing. So, all right, so let's take a look then. I think basically I've hit the 9 minutes here, so I'm going to stop this, and I will keep going in a second. See you guys soon.